For Special Operations Commander Major Glenn Ignazio on this. It is always good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. It's great to be back with you.
There is so much to unpack here and a lot of complexity, but we know an Israeli delegation was in Cairo today. That talks apparently stalled with the assassination of this top Hamas leader, which Israel, by the way, has not officially taken credit for. Where do you believe talks stand now? How does all of this impact these ceasefire talks?
Sure. As we know right now, Hamas is in discussion to find a person to replace him in those particular talks and discussions. In addition to this, Qatar did not go to those talks, which they have always been pivotal between the Israelis and Hamas as far as being that inter-between to be able to get these negotiations going. So I didn't expect much to come out of it. You know, we're holding that the prior 6-week pause where we can get some of the older female hostages out and let some people get back to their homes, which were the conditions that were sort of agreed upon. That would be great to move forward, but this does stall things just because they don't even have a person present to be able to negotiate for them, and that's Hamas, that is.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Iranian proxies are said to be meeting behind the scenes, planning to retaliate on Israel. Tell me a little bit more about the capabilities of the U.S. fighter jets and Navy warships that are moving into the region right now. And do you think, how serious do you think the U.S. is about the situation, given that Secretary of State Lloyd Austin is saying really the U.S. is ready?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. And first of all, you're right. Iran has been in discussions with Houthis and Hezbollah. And what we're going to see is we saw around 300 plus attacks before from Iran, which were stopped by Jordanians, U.S. and other allied forces. What would this be with the Houthis being involved, Hezbollah being involved, much formidable than it was before, as a all-out massive attack that would be significantly larger than what we saw some months ago. What that would do is potentially overwhelm some of the defensive forces, especially in Israel. And so with the carrier groups and the fighter aircraft are going to be designed to shoot down any of these particular air threats, drones, missiles, and so forth. So that's one of the biggest presence about having those carrier groups there is, one, it is definitely a little intimidation to have those carrier groups sitting there, but it's really for a defensive nature to be able to shoot down any kind of air assets or missile assets that are being launched to them. Hezbollah would probably be the most dangerous because they're the closest, they have a large volume, and they could put a lot of damage and harm to Israelis if that is to kick off.
I'm so glad that you're bringing this context to us, because unlike the usual situation where often this is a show of force, it's just a deterrent, it seems like what you're saying is, should the Iron Dome be overwhelmed and actually fail in an Iranian retaliation, that these U.S. vessels, this U.S. presence would actually be able to intercept and help that overwhelm. So that's very interesting. I do want to ask the vice president and potentially the next president on those calls with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well. How would you advise either Harris or Trump as this conflict continues?
In all honesty, I would be doing something a little bit different than what has been, which is to pull back and let Netanyahu and his defense force deal with this situation. So a lot of times we've been sort of pushing our opinion or having them check with us, and I would be sort of pulling back. They're the experts. They're in that area. They're the ones who have to defend themselves. But I would be, what is it that you need? What is the shortfall that you feel needs to be strengthened to make sure that you're defensive in nature? Again, our efforts as far as the United States should be to provide as much of a defensive dome on there so that this does not explode into a bigger conflict. So that's one of the things I would definitely emphasize and give them what they need. But at the same time, let Israel deal with what they need to deal with. They've been there for years. They know the expertise of what they have for attacks and the threats in the region. So I take a little bit of a different approach to it.
Okay. Retired Air Force Special Operations Commander Major Glenn Ignazio, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com